Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I had a pretty interesting conversation with some of the guys here at work throughout the day. We've been talking a lot about price inflation. We're starting to see the vendors are sending out notices that we should anticipate that we are going to see some increase in pricing. Now, it's not uncommon to see, once a year, maybe the vendors, sending something out saying, hey, look for maybe a 5% increase, 6% increase, something like that. It's not uncommon for it, I mean, not once a year, but, for it to happen. It's just occasionally you see it out there. Right now, I have a lot of vendors who are sending us notifications that there is going to be price increasing. And this is something that I hadn't seen so many vendors doing at the same time. So it's pretty interesting coming into the building season, how we have these vendors who are now like putting out the announcement to say, hey, here in the next, 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to have a price increase. And most of them are like around 10% or so, 10 to 15 even. Now, of course, if we're looking at lumber has increased in price by 4 times in just over the course of a year. But all the rest of the materials are starting to go up too. Now, they have lagged behind. They did not follow lumber as far as the increase in price as dramatically. Now, I did see an increase from last year to this year, but now we're seeing it again, going from last year, again into the new year. And so when I got to thinking about this, and I said to the guys, I said, man, we're definitely at the top of this cycle. And one of them said, and who's been working the business a long time, he says, well, that's your opinion. You're either right or you're wrong. And I was like, I was taken a little bit back, and I'm like, well, I just see that we kind of been pumping along here, watching the price. I was a little nervous about saying it. I said, we've been watching the prices increase here. I really don't see how prices can increase much further and have that booming housing market like we have had before. It's just too expensive. And there was a little bit of an argument, not an argument, just, an argument raised about it saying, well, really 2x4s have not increased in inflation. Like, they haven't increased in pricing as dramatically as a lot of other things have out there. And he said, what was the cheapest you have ever sold a 2x4? Now, me personally, I remember selling 2x4s. I mean, I remember getting them all the way down under $2, but I said $2.25 was the low that I had sold 2x4s for, 2x4 8s. To put that in comparison, they are selling for $8.50 today. So he fires up an inflation calculator and he punches in, back in the early 70s or mid 70s, 99 cents. I guess that's how much studs sold for back then. And in this inflation calculator, he punched in 2021. And the price of the 2x4 popped up at $4.69. Now, at $4.69, I thought that was pretty expensive a couple of years ago when lumber futures had hit $650 per thousand. And I thought, man, $460 a stud? That's incredible. Who would pay that much? But of course, now we're selling them at $850, and we'd be begging for $460 again on our studs. But I thought that was interesting that when he punches it in there, it come up at $460, and I thought, now that seems like a reasonable price for inflation. I mean, that would be to me, be accurate. A low of $225 on a, really volatile commodity like lumber, and having a high of $460 or $469 or whatever it came up, that seemed very reasonable to me. And that a channel of pricing within that would seem like, a very likely scenario. 2x4s at $850 continuing to rise from here does not seem very realistic to me. Not at all. Now, can the cycle continue? Well, yeah, sure. I mean, the housing could continue. I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, they still make lumber. People still nail it together. People are still taking out loans to buy homes. There is no reason to think that the housing market couldn't continue. Absolutely it can. But will it? That's the other question. See, I don't think it will. I think that we are coming into a situation in which that the mortgages are so cheap as far as the interest rates go that it's caused the prices of houses to become unaffordable. And now, even if they weren't unaffordable, they are very close to unaffordable at this point. They have gone up incredibly in price. What was I reading? Something about like 11% year over year is what the average real estate home purchase has done. I mean, that's doubling. That's essentially, it's like 10%. That would be doubling every 7 years. That means you can buy a house and in 7 years sell it for twice to what you paid for it. Does that even seem realistic? Now, I know to the person who's purchased real estate, they're thinking, yeah, I'm in the money, right? That this is awesome. I can't wait for that moment. I'll be able to sell my house. I would love for that to happen. Like they anticipate, that would be great. Does it seem realistic? That's all I have to ask. You know, if people want to see, like a lot of times people are talking about the stock market, like how great it would be to be in the stock market and have have this great run like, you experienced since the great financial crisis. We went from 6,000 at the Dow to 12 to 24 to 30. Here we are at 30,000 Dow. If we were to expect anything like what we had experienced over the last 10 or 12 years, then you would have to see the Dow go from 30 to 60 to 120,000. Does that seem realistic? Does it seem logical that that can happen? But that's what people would anticipate if we are going to have the next 10 years look anything similar to the last 10 years. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, say we have a major pullback, a 50% correction in the Dow. It drops all the way down to 15,000. But then we have the economic boom. And Dow goes from 15 to 30 to 60. I think we got something that's a little bit more reasonable. Something that's a little bit more realistic. That over the course of the 10 years, we go from 15 to 60 on the Dow. See, I don't try and be the optimistic thinker, right? If I just thought optimistically all the time, then I would never anticipate anything bad ever happening. And if you do that, you will fail. You have to be worried about failing. You have to worry about the bad times. If you just kind of cast that aside and just always wish for the best, you're not going to protect yourself. See, I don't see there being that big economic boom until we have at least some sort of correction, some sort of pullback, some place to start from that doesn't cause us to go into the irrational exuberance. We need to burn out some of that undergrowth. The Federal Reserve has come out and stated that they do not see the inflation not showing up in the consumer price index, not like they would like to see it. Everybody's talking about the inflation that they see out there. Something interesting that they pointed out is that they see the inflation, or at least the prices, increasing due to supply constraints. Think about it. Bottlenecking in the supply chains, creating a shortage. And when there is a demand and a shortage, then prices increase. It not because of the inflation, but because of the supply-demand issue. That is what I feel is taking place in lumber right now. See, if lumber was increasing, like, say, the doors and the windows and the nails, where you get 5% last year, another 10% this year, I would call it inflation. I would say, okay, we have some inflation numbers taking place here. But when you have a 2x4 selling for $2.50 last year and $8.50 today, that is not inflation. That is a supply chain issue. And that's what I feel that the Federal Reserve is waiting for, is for that supply chain bottlenecking to work its way through. Because you cannot tell whether or not this is inflation price inflation taking place, or if it's just a supply constraint taking place. And that's what I feel a lot of what's happening right here, is that we have a supply constraint taking place. Definitely inside of lumber. Definitely in plywood. And, those things don't show up in the consumer price index. So you're not going to see lumber or building supplies at all have any kind of impact on the inflation numbers out there. Not the ones that the Fed is looking at anyway. So, I'm not sure if I wanted to add anything else to that, but just wanted to share some of those thoughts and the conversations that we've had today. I definitely want to thank the the few individuals who have sent me some tips lately, guys, you're so awesome. Every time somebody sends me a little token of appreciation like that, it totally makes my day. And yesterday, I'm at the counter, and one of the other employees is ringing up a customer, and I was just kind of just not really paying attention to what they were doing, just kind of doing my own thing. And the customer comes around to the side of the counter, and he says, "Hey, man," and he reaches out and he hands me a little bit of money, and he looked at me and he says, "Man, thank you." And I knew right away why he was doing it, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it totally was just like, I love that stuff, When I started this channel, I've said it a million times, but when I started this channel, I never thought it would ever go anywhere. And, you guys are really changing my life. You've really done a number for me. And I can't thank you enough. And to know that there's people out there who appreciate it as much as that, to take the time to come down and, hand me that token of appreciation. I can't thank you guys enough, man. You really have changed my life. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.